Today we're going to talk about Rigel Nascom, also known as Sir Rigel the Bold. So Rigel is a deeply important character to the story of Glory Days as well as the setting of Glory Days. And this comes in a couple different forms, one of which is that the narrator is describing an ensemble cast, but focuses more on some characters than others, and Rigel is one of the characters that gets more of the spotlight. Within the setting, however, Rigel is known as the last great adventurer hero. Now, this is because the peak of his career really happened near the end of the Age of Magic. He was the last great one before the Age of Magic ended, and so that's kind of what he's known for. He's known the world over, really, for some of his exploits. He's kind of a folk hero in some places. He's kind of a legend in others. But that's part of the reason that he's actually in the story to begin with, is that Lord Harrow, in seeking to kind of legitimize his work and also help build support for what he's doing, is going to Rigel as a name that people recognize and know things about already. But also he's relying on Rigel's experience and skills and stuff like that to help with the actual task of this quest, and as well to help train the younger adventurers that he's already recruited. Rigel is essentially a walking symbol of the age that passed. He hasn't given up on it. He hasn't really moved on from it. He's still living as though this is the age that he's in. He's just waiting for his next adventure. And so he's very excited when that adventure comes along, when Lord Harrow shows up to recruit him for this mission. He treats it very much as this is part of the life that he should already be living. And so he's really on board with what Harrow is doing, at least at first. When he first is introduced to the idea of what Lord Harrow wants to accomplish, he's very much on board. He's very much invested in seeing this result. Now, one of the key things, though, is that he's very close to Sandara, and so as she starts to question Harrow, he's aware of this questioning and has to kind of wrestle with that. And it does involve some wrestling. He wants to trust Harrow. He wants to believe Harrow. He wants to believe that what they're doing is a good thing. And Sandara is starting to raise the question of whether or not it actually is. And that is something that he doesn't really have room for in his ideology at first. He doesn't really want to explore that question. Now, he kind of becomes the de facto leader of the group that is doing this adventuring thing. Like I said, all the younger adventurers look up to him as a hero, as somebody as a role model that they're looking up to, that they're trying to model their lives after. The other people in the party who aren't necessarily adventurers have heard of him and do have the pre-established opinions about him. And so when he shows up and joins on with the party, people start looking up to him as a leader. And Sandara even does to a certain extent, although she tries to serve more of an advisory role than a follower role. Rigel is a Din, which is, as I've mentioned before, about the closest thing to a human that exists in the setting. He is a bit hairier than humans. He is a bit bulkier. He does have a little bit extra strength above what a human in the real world would have. But that's what they are. They are that world's version of humans. And if I were to build him in like D&D or Pathfinder or something, he would be very much a barbarian with a little bit of multi-classing into fighter for the feats and the skill and stuff like that. That's kind of how he approaches these things. He is someone who fights. He is someone who takes damage. He is someone who charges into the fray. In fact, Rigel's character was heavily influenced by a line in Younger by the Mountain Goats, where he says, "Storm right down that hill. If I don't, no one will follow me right through the chaos." Rigel is, within the story, essentially the guiding principle. He is the person who is going to decide the outcome of the story. If he sides with Harrow in the end, then Harrow is going to get what he wants. If he opposes Harrow in the end, then the group is going to rise up against him. And that is the deciding factor. And that is why Sandara focuses on him as the person to talk to, partly because he's her friend. She actually knows him a lot better than she knows the other people in the group. They've been together for years at this point. But also because strategically, he's the person to convince. Where Rigel goes, the rest of the group is going to go. And where that group goes is going to determine the fate of the rest of the world. And that is what comes down to a lot of what happens in Glory Days. A lot of Glory Days comes down to this relationship between Sandara and Rigel and Lord Harrow, and the ways that that is going to change everything for the rest of the world. Keep an eye on this channel for more information on Glory Days as I'm working on the book and as I'm, introducing characters and as I share snippets and stuff like that. The video I uploaded last Friday has the snippet from the very beginning of the story that introduces Rigel, among a couple other things. So I encourage you to check that out and hang around. Thank you.